Good afternoon. Thank you for having me today. Hilda, thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to participate in this wonderful event and be here with all of you. So, everyone here who owns a business has a problem. Whether you know it or not, you have a problem. It's called mortality. None of us can work forever. None of us can live forever. Every privately held business eventually needs a transition plan. And you're not alone. By some estimates, nearly half of privately held businesses in America are owned by people aged 55 to 65. The baby boomer generation is retiring. In our industry, we refer to that as the silver tsunami. It's coming. We talked about a rising tide in our last panel. From my perspective, it's definitely a tsunami. So what are the common approaches that you see used for transitioning ownership of a business? There are many options. Perhaps what many have in mind is a friendly transition, what I'll call a friendly transition, where maybe a family member is going to buy the business, hopefully maybe a second or third generation will purchase the business over time in some way, shape, or form. Other friendly transitions include maybe a management buyout, a seasoned management team that's willing to step up and become the owners. What are the problems with those approaches that we commonly see? Well, for one, most of those groups don't have any money with which to pay for the business. Big problem. Also, sometimes children don't want the business. Many business owners assume that that's going to be their ownership strategy, transition strategy, only to find out that somebody wants to be a vocal performance major instead of running the business. Management team very often still doesn't have any money with which to pay for the business, and they may not be very far behind the business owners themselves in terms of their own retirement target, and probably unwilling to put up personal assets or put assets at risk to purchase the business. And why is that? Well, because of the way businesses are taxed, in order to pay a former owner $1 for their business, you have to earn $2 so that after tax you can pay them the $1 you have left. If you have a business that's valued at maybe 6 times its annual earnings, under that premise, it will take at least 12 years to pay for that business out of its own profits. Right? Earning $2 for every one of principal paid, 6 times valuation, 12 years. And that's assuming that the new ownership group does not withdraw a dime during that 12-year period. So in other words, they're owning it, but they're not enjoying any of the benefits of ownership for 12 long years. To alleviate that problem, very often that successor ownership team is looking for some kind of discount on the purchase. Sometimes a very significant discount. Maybe the current owners are willing to do that, maybe they're not. So those are areas where we see these friendly transitions sometimes run into trouble. So what's another option that avoids those difficulties? Maybe a sale to a third party. Some independent third party buyer wants to come in and wants to put cash on the barrel to buy your business so that you have an immediate payoff. Right? What are the problems with that approach? Well, finding a buyer, for one, no easy task. Depending on the industry that you're in, buyers might be plentiful or they might be very, very scarce. Secondly, it can be an adversarial process. These third-party buyers recognize that this is a zero-sum game. Every dollar that they pay you is a dollar they don't get to keep. Every term that they give in on is a term where you win and they lose. And it can be a very adversarial process. It can be also very time-consuming, expensive. Due diligence can be extensive. And there's also a potential opportunity for bad faith, where maybe they're not really interested in buying your business, maybe they're really interested in learning about how you run your business by seeing inside the tent, so to speak. Now, and potentially the worst part of these independent third-party transitions that we see is that it can be very difficult for a business owner to lose control of that business and to see what they toiled over for years with blood, sweat, and tears now turned over to somebody else who will do who knows what with the business. Especially in a faith-based community like this, will they have the same principles? Will they have the same ethics? Will they have the same vision that you have? Most likely not. So in either of these scenarios, whether it be a friendly transition or a more adversarial independent third-party transition, what do the employees benefit if this deal is consummated? The rank and file employees, what do they get out of a business transition? Nothing. The best they can hope for is to keep their job. The best they can hope for is that the new buyer doesn't move the business outside of their community, doesn't change adversely their working conditions, doesn't reduce, downsize, leverage the business, turn around and flip it in 3 years, whatever private equity likes to do. Okay, that's the best they can hope for in many cases. So my question today is there another way? One of my favorite chapters in Scripture is 1 Corinthians 13, where Paul talks about divine love or charity. The preface to that chapter, the last verse of chapter 12, he talks about the more excellent way. Okay. And I like to think of employee stock ownership plans and employee ownership in general as a more excellent way. What if I could tell you that you could sell your business for full fair market value, no discount, that you could get paid in half the time that an internally leveraged or management buyout could pay you over, so not 12 years, but 6. What if I told you you could avoid paying taxes on the sale? No capital gains. What if I told you that you could remain at the helm of that business after you sold it to ensure that you got paid off, but more importantly, to ensure that the business is on stable footing, that you can mentor the successor management team and set the foundation for their own future success? What if I told you that through this process you could transfer 100% of the value of that business to the employee owners, to your family, to your household, that helped you get where you are? And that they could acquire this business with no out-of-pocket cost to themselves and no personal risk. And if that weren't enough, what if I told you that you could then operate that business on a essentially tax-exempt basis, where the only taxes this business would pay would be the 1.5% S corporation tax that California charges S corporations, otherwise completely tax-exempt? That is the concept of employee stock ownership plans. It was invented by an economist named Louis Kelso in the 1950s. It was enshrined into federal law in the 70s by Senator Russell Long with the passage of the Employee Retirement Income Security Act. 45 years later, we have 6,700 ESOPs across the nation, covering 14 million employees, providing 2.5 times more retirement benefits than any other typical retirement plan. Businesses that are employee-owned tend to grow 25% faster in terms of job creation. They remain rooted deeply in the community. The legacy that the founders created is enshrined through the board of directors and through the successor management team. Studies have shown that employee-owned businesses are 25% more likely to stay in business during a recession and 4 times less likely to lay off their employees during a recession. Professionally, I'm a recovering tax CPA. That was my background and my training. I love that profession and I learned so much. But at the end of the day, I was always the bearer of bad news. This is, for me, professionally, a huge blessing to be involved in this more excellent way of transitioning business ownership to employee owners in America. Thank you very much.